Hey, Black Belt reads. So, internet horror. Now, there's so many creepypastas or just stories that originated from the internet. So, I thought I'd do maybe like a top 10. This is sort of my favorite 10, just kind of off the top of my head. Just put the list together relatively quickly. There's so many stories out there. If something's not on this list, please let me know. Maybe I haven't read it yet. So, we'll start very much nice and easy, and then we'll kind of graduate up to my favorites. Like the top five are definitely going to be my favorites. So this isn't everyone's cup of tea. Internet horror, sometimes it can get the reputation for being badly written or cheesy or whatever, but some of these are really effective. And I feel like I'm pretty picky with what I enjoy. So we'll see. Number 10, Ted the Caver. So this is probably the oldest and the least scary, but just try to imagine it's like the early stages of the internet, kind of like the Blair Witch Project, the movie, where you're meant to believe that it's real. So this is a story about a guy who goes into a cave to explore, and creepy things happen to him. But it's written as if it's like a personal blog that he's updating. And if you think it's real, and it's pretty affecting, and it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. So, of course, years and years later, there's so many better stories, but this is like a really staple. And I remember reading this way back in the day and found it pretty effective. So I'm going to try not to talk about all of these stories for a long time. I'm not going to try to ramble. I'm just going to give you a quick synopsis. So, number 9, The Spire in the Woods. This is this is more of a well-written story than some of the other ones. Not incredibly scary, but definitely creepy. Gives you a bit of that dread feeling, which is my favorite kind of horror. It's about a guy whose friend commits suicide, and he's trying to figure out why would he do that, right? And one of his letters says something about a clock tower in the woods. So they go to explore, and you can imagine where it goes, right? There's this really creepy clock in the middle of the woods. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. Number 8, Candle Cove. This is a really, really fun idea. Do you guys remember that show back in the day when we were kids? It came on Saturday mornings, and it was like a pirate ship with puppets. What was the name of it? I can't remember. Nobody knows what you're talking about. And then every once in a while, someone will be like, "Yeah, I remember that show." You ask your parents, they don't know what you're talking about. You can't find any information of it online. So that's kind of the premise of this story. So this one's really short, but effective, and then a bit of a twist ending, which I really like. So try not to spoil things too much. All of these stories you can just look up, Candle Cove, Reddit, or whatever, and you'll find it, read it really quickly, and it's just a fun little story that is, creepy. Number 7, The Red Lamp. This is another one of those stories that is meant to be taken as a true story. Don't know that it is. Um, Judge for yourself, I guess. But either way, the story's really good. I gotta spoil this one just a little bit. You can go pause the video, go read it. It's just a couple pages, but it's really effective to me. I think about it all the time. It's about a guy who's married. He's got kids. He sitting on his couch one day watching TV, and he notices that this red lamp that he has in his living room that's always been there starts to look weird. He's kind of looking at it, and it seems out of focus, like blurry, and gets a little more blurry, a little more out of focus, draws more of his peripheral vision to the point where he's just kind of staring at it, and it's like he can't focus on it. It's weird, right? So he goes to bed, comes up the next day, No one says anything about the lamp in his house, but he sits down and the lamp's doing the same thing. If anything, it seems stronger. So, everyone goes to bed. He stays up all night. He can't figure out what is up with this lamp. Eventually, it starts to encompass his whole vision, and all he can see is this red light. This red lamp starts to move, and here's where the big spoiler is going to come. So, if you haven't read it, spoilers, but you've probably all heard this story before. The lamp starts to take over his whole vision until he just sort of wakes up and he's being carried away on a stretcher. And they're telling him he's been in an accident, a car crash or something. And he basically hallucinated while he was unconscious his whole life that he'd had previously with his wife and his children. None of it was real. It was all just a dream trip that he had while he got this horrible head injury. And I think about that all the time. Like, what is reality? What if you just wake up one day and the last 10 years of your life was a dream? Like, that's pretty effective to me. I love that story. Not overly horror, but I felt like it deserved a place on this list. Number 6. This one, unlike the red lamp, is actually scary to me. It is. My wife has been peeking at me. Yeah, just go look it up, read it. It's just a few pages long, really effective, really creepy. It's kind of like that movie Smile, where people are smiling at you. I thought that movie was effective as well. Scary. It's funny. There's something about when someone smiles at you. They smile with their eyes, and you can tell that they're inviting, friendly, happy. Something is funny, but also a smile can quickly turn into creepy, right? If someone's just smiling at you with dead eyes or just smiling at you, it kind of becomes like uncanny. That's what this story is. This guy's been married to his wife for 6, 7 years. She's got no sense of humor. She's just very serious all the time. And he's always telling her, you should lighten up. So one day he goes to leave, getting ready for work, had his coffee, walking out the door, and he looks, and his wife is just peeking around the corner, just smiling at him. And it's creepy. And he's like, what are you doing? And she runs off. And he's like, you freak, what are you doing? Love you, I'm going to work. Comes back the next day. She doesn't mention it. He thinks nothing of it. She was just being weird. But then it starts to happen more and more. And it becomes a regular thing where he will just be doing something and he'll just feel like something's watching him. You've all got that feeling before where something's watching you. And he'll look and look. And then he'll see his wife is like peeking around the corner, just staring at him with this creepy grin. It's freaky, right? And it's like just normal enough to where you'd be like, not that freaked out, but also like, what the hell is going on? His wife acts like nothing's happening. One night he comes in the middle of the night to get a drink. His wife's asleep in the bed. He gets up, goes downstairs, gets the drink, and he gets that feeling. And he turns around, and his wife's underneath the kitchen table, looking up at him. This story actually gave me chills when I read it, just the way it's written. I highly recommend this one. Probably should have been higher on the list, really, for actual creep factor. Um, he's like, what the hell? She runs up to the bed. He goes upstairs. She's asleep in the bed. He's like, what is going on? Why are you doing this? You're freaking me out. And she acts like nothing's happening, like he's being crazy. So he starts to get really freaked out. A couple weeks go by and it doesn't happen. And he's like, finally, she's done with that, whatever the hell that was. And he mentions it to her, like, hey, thank you for not doing that anymore. It's really weird. And she's like, maybe I've just gotten better at the game. And that is fucking scary, right? So now he's so paranoid that she's doing it and he just hasn't noticed. So he's just in a constant state of fear, looking everywhere. Um, How many times have you guys been in the shower and had your eyes closed, water running, and you just, feel like something's there with you? I can't be the only one. That's got to be a common feeling, right? You're in the shower and you just feel vulnerable when your eyes are closed. So he's in the shower and he's washing his hair. He's got soap on his face. He rinses it and he starts to get that feeling, the feeling that someone's watching him. That's pretty scary, right? So he rinses his face and looks, and his wife is peeking over the shower curtain, staring at him, just half of her head peeking out. And he flips out. He falls in the shower. So scary. And then he's just standing there staring at her. And she's just grinning at him. And slowly she starts to back away. And he's just like horrified. Anyway, I said I wasn't going to ramble. Here I am rambling. That's just a good story. All right, let's move on. It's got a good ending. Number 5, the sleep experiment. So this is one of the more famous internet-based horror stories that I think it became a movie. I haven't watched it. Um, it's got a physical book copy. Uh, really effective, about a group of people who do this experiment. I think they are like criminals who are gonna stay awake. So there's this gas that comes in, it keeps them awake for days and days. And if you've ever stayed awake for a long period of time, you will start to hallucinate. This has happened to me once in my life where I stayed up for a long time. I was young, I was, not sober, stayed up for a long time, and I started to hallucinate. I remember seeing the doors looked like they were breathing. It's really freaky. Little things like that happen, and then I got my life together after that, right? But in this, they are kind of chemically induced to stay awake, and really horrible things start to happen. They all start to hallucinate. They all just lose their grip on reality. Really effective story. Number 4, Anasi's Goatman. The Goatman. It's just like, oh, come on, the Goatman, that's not that scary. There's so many of these that I didn't put on the list that are more famous, more popular, like Slender Man, Jeff the Killer, all these that are really popular that you've all heard of. But I didn't put them on my list. I'm doing the Goatman. The Goatman actually freaked me out, man. It's about a group of teenagers in the woods in a cabin that one of them, owns or is part of his family. So there's just a group of kids and they don't really all know each other. So there's maybe like 12 kids, but there's just enough kids there that they're all a little unfamiliar with each other. It's kind of like a party, right? Oh, she brought 2 friends. You don't really know who they are. He brought his cousin. You don't really know. So they're all kind of partying in the woods, and they start to get this really creeping sense of dread that something's watching them or whatever, and they start to smell like a coppery smell. It makes them kind of sick. They decide, it's time to eat something. So they have a pack of food, and there's like, okay, so I think there's just enough people there for them all to have like a burger and a hot dog or something. So they eat all the food, and one of them's mad, like, hey, how come you got 2 of them, And the guy's like, I only had 1. What are you talking about? Anyway, they realized that there was one extra person in their group than they thought there was. And it's just a small little subtle thing. That's why I harped on them not really all knowing each other. They realized there was someone there, but now they're not sure if they're there or not. And they all can't quite remember who all was in their party. So they do a little folklore campfire horror session where they talk about, the legend of these woods and the Goatman. And the Goatman can take the shape of things and people and infiltrate and lure you away to kill you, right? So they're all a little freaked out, but whatever. Well, then slowly people start to disappear. And every time someone disappears, they'll smell that coppery smell. And they realize the smell is like blood. What they're smelling is like a really thick, nasty blood. So at one point they wake up, people are missing. So they go outside, and there's someone with their back to them, just staring off into the woods, and they get that horrible blood smell. And now they're really freaked out. The story's really good, really effective, really fun in the way that you're in a group of people and you don't know them, and the stranger in the group. But the twist on that is, what if the stranger is like a goat demon guy that can shapeshift? Really fun story. I liked it. It gave me a good sense of fear and dread. All right, top three. These are probably my three favorite, of course. They could probably shuffle in the list, but for now, I'll go number three, Borrasca. This one is not supernatural. It's just a really chilling story about a town with a dark secret. Like I said, these stories can have a reputation for being badly written, amateurish, cheesy. This one, I think it's well written. It kept me engaged the whole time. This is probably the longest one on the list, to be honest. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's just about children that disappear, and sort of a local folklore about a place in the woods that you shouldn't go to because kids keep disappearing there. And then our protagonist, someone very close to him, actually, I remember right, it's his sister. His sister disappears. And so he really wants to figure out why, he starts to investigate it. Things fall apart for him. There's a huge time skip. Yeah, man, the story's really good, really effective, and really, really horrifying in that it's something that could really happen. It's not supernatural at all. All right, number two, Footsteps. It was originally called Footsteps. A lot of you probably know it as Pen Pal. Pen Pal is arguably a better name for the story. Tells you more about what it is. It's kind of maybe a more catchy name, but I like that it was originally called Footsteps. About a class of children, and they put a little note writing to a pen pal, and they attach it to a balloon, and they let them all go. And this is a real thing that people did in the past. I had someone comment that they remember doing this as a kid. That's pretty cool. So obviously not something that can happen nowadays because everyone knows how creepy people really are. But you can imagine where this is going, right? Our main character here, he gets a letter back in the mail from a pen pal, and it's seemingly innocent, but things escalate in a very creepy way. Now, the reason it's called Footsteps, and the reason I like that so much, is because he talks about being asleep at night, laying your head down on the pillow, and if you kind of lay the wrong way on your pillow, it puts pressure on your ear, and you can hear the blood pumping in your ear, right? I'm sure you guys all experience this. So you kind of have to adjust right to where your blood, you don't hear your blood pumping in your ear. But he talks about when he lays down and he hears that, it sounds like footsteps. Boom, 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 boom. And that always stuck with me. So every night I lay down in bed and, get that pressure on your ear, and you kind of hear your blood, and you have to adjust right. Anyway, really effective. Not the most elegant writing, but the story is just full of dread, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Need to read it again. All of these are very quick reads. I mean, I think Borrasca is probably the longest. Maybe Spire in the Woods is pretty long, if I remember correctly. There's some really long ones that I didn't include on the list, like Search and Rescue, Woods. There's some really good stories. Just look them up. All of these can be easily just looked up and read online in just a few minutes for the most part, including number one on my list. This might be a little controversial. I don't think this is one of the most popular ones, but for me, it's the one I think of as my favorite that I've ever read. No End House. Now, I love haunted houses. It's like my favorite horror genre. So maybe that's why I also love religious horror, and this is sort of like the layers of hell. I think of it that way. It's about a house, and people know when you it's like a dare. Hey, I bet you won't go in no end house. When you go in, no one ever comes out. We get the perspective from a character who, doesn't really want to go in the house, but he has a roommate who's disappeared, and they say that's because he went in no end house. So now he's like, come on, let's see what's really up here. So he decides to go in the house, and in this house, you walk in, and there's just doors leading to other rooms, and they get progressively more horrifying. I don't really want to spoil it, but I want to mention one part because it's really effective to me. So, spoilers for No End House. Go read it very quickly. Come back if you want. Goes through the layers of this house, and they get more and more horrifying. And at one point, he closes the door to a room, and it's like one of those deprivation tanks where there's no sound, you can't feel anything, you can't see anything, just this horrifying, crushing sense of dread. There's rooms where something's in there with him. Anyway, eventually he opens the door, and he's outside, and he's out of the house, and he's been absolutely terrified by the previous rooms. He's crying. He decides he's just going to go home, sleep it off. So he goes home, and he's in his house, and slowly everything starts to fall apart, and he realizes he's still in No End House. That's really effective to me. I love that story. Let me know if there's anything on here that you guys think should be on the list. Maybe I just haven't read it yet. Or if there's really popular ones like Slender Man that you think should have been on the list as well. So, internet horror. Yeah, just a fun little subsection of the horror genre that I enjoy. I'm always reading those Reddit posts, Nosleep, Creepypasta, stuff like that. So let me know if you enjoyed this, and if you liked it, please consider subscribing. Thanks.